For the first half of the 20th century, one piece of technology ran virtually everything. Your radio, your television, the telephone network that connected a continent, the radar systems that helped win World War II, the world's first computers, all of it. One component. Then, in 1947, something better came along. Solid state, no heat, no burnouts required. Within 2 decades, every major manufacturer on Earth had shut down their production lines and moved on. The factories closed, the skilled workers scattered. Decades of specialized knowledge simply disappeared. The verdict was unanimous. The technology was finished. In 2025, the global market for that same technology sits at $3.3 billion, projected to reach $5 billion by 2032. That technology is the vacuum tube. And the story of why it refused to die is a lot stranger than anyone expected. You know what they look like? That warm orange glow from your grandfather's radio. The lit-up insides of a hi-fi console in 1962, filling a living room with sound. Glass cylinders with glowing filaments inside. The nervous system of every radio, every television, every piece of serious electronics in America before the transistor took over. The experts declared them finished, obsolete, ancient history. They were wrong. And by the end of this, you're going to realize it's been quietly running your world for decades without you knowing. Let's start at the end, in a cemetery. 1946, Philadelphia. Engineers at the University of Pennsylvania unveiled the world's first general-purpose electronic computer. It filled an entire room. 50 feet long, 30 feet wide, weighed 30 tons. Consumed enough electricity to light a small neighborhood, and it ran on 18,000 vacuum tubes. 18,000. Every single one a glass bottle with a burning filament inside, hissing heat, day and night. And at least one burned out every single day. Engineers walked the floor with replacement tubes tucked under their arms, hunting for the dead one, swapping it out, starting over. It wasn't a design flaw, it was just the reality of what tubes were. Picture what that room smelled like: warm glass, burnt metal, the faint ozone tang of hundreds of circuits running at full load. The whole floor was a furnace that never cooled down. Then, in December 1947, 3 physicists at Bell Labs in New Jersey changed everything. John Vardeen, Walter Brattain, William Shockley. They held up a device you could balance on your fingertip, solid, quiet. No glass, no heat, no burnouts. The transistor. All 3 men would eventually share the Nobel Prize in Physics, but the world didn't wait for the ceremony. The industry moved fast. For a while, nobody was completely sure which way things would go. Tubes still sounded warmer in audio applications. Audiophiles argued. Guitar players argued louder. But for radios, televisions, and portable devices, transistors were smaller, cooler, cheaper, and they didn't die on you. The math wasn't close. One by one, the production lines stopped. Workers clocked out for the last time. The ones who'd spent their careers mastering this craft moved on, and the knowledge they'd built up over 30 years went with them. By the mid-1960s, the industry had made up its mind. The vacuum tube was finished. While the industry was writing the obituary, the tube had already slipped quietly into places where nothing else could do the job. One of those places is your kitchen. Go to your kitchen. Look at the microwave on your counter. Because right now, inside that appliance, is a vacuum tube. The device at the heart of every microwave oven is called a cavity magnetron. It generates energy at 2.45 gigahertz, turning electrical power into the microwave radiation that heats your food, and it's a vacuum tube, built on the same basic principles as the radar systems that helped win World War II. Over 1 billion magnetron tubes are running in kitchens around the world right now. Millions more get manufactured every year. The single most mass-produced vacuum tube in history isn't in a museum. It isn't in a collector's cabinet. It's above your stove. You've owned one your whole life. Nobody ever mentioned it. But the kitchen is just the beginning. Every day, in cancer treatment centers across the country, machines called linear accelerators are at work. They fire electrons to nearly the speed of light, then convert that energy into precision X-rays aimed directly at tumors. The first clinical machine of this kind was installed at Hammersmith Hospital in London back in 1952. Today, in 2026, that same fundamental technology is the global standard for cancer radiotherapy. It just doesn't look like what you remember. But even that isn't the most extraordinary example. In 1977, NASA launched Voyager 1. Right now, Voyager is approximately 15.8 billion miles from Earth. It's crossed the boundary of our solar system. It's drifting through interstellar space, somewhere no human-made machine has ever traveled before. And it's still calling home. At the heart of that signal is a traveling wave tube amplifier, a vacuum tube, running without interruption for nearly 49 years. No silicon chip has ever operated for 49 years in the cold and radiation of deep space. The tube does. In 2020, that amplifier was inducted into the Space Technology Hall of Fame. So here's your scoreboard, your kitchen, cancer treatment centers, the farthest human-made object in history. And we haven't even gotten to the crisis yet, because in 2022, the world was about to discover just how dependent it had quietly become on a technology nobody was supposed to need anymore. March 11th, 2022. The world was watching Ukraine, but inside guitar stores and recording studios, a different kind of alarm was going off. Russia had just announced a ban on exports covering over 200 categories of goods. Most industries skimmed the list and moved on. Guitar players read the whole thing. In the city of Saratov, Russia, there was a factory, the New Sensor Corporation, owned not by a Russian company, but by an American, Mike Matthews, the founder of Electro-Harmonics, one of the most respected names in the guitar world for over 50 years. That one factory wasn't just supplying one brand of tubes, it was supplying 7 of them simultaneously. Tungsol, Electro-Harmonics, EH Gold, Genelex Gold Lion, Mullard, Svetlana, Sovtek. 7 brands, 1 factory, gone overnight. Within 48 hours, retail stock across America was essentially wiped out. Secondary market prices spiked. Some tubes jumped 200% almost instantly. Sellers who'd had inventory the day before pulled their websites offline entirely. Repair shops started turning customers away because there was nothing to fix things with. In Nashville, guitar techs were working their contact lists. In New York, studio engineers were checking their tube inventories for the first time in years. Producers who'd never thought twice about it realized they'd been running with exactly 0 backup supply. Think about that for a second. The global semiconductor industry gets congressional hearings, billions in government attention, entire geopolitical strategies built around chip supply. But the supply chain for vacuum tubes? Nobody had a contingency plan. Nobody had run the scenario, because nobody thought they needed to, until they did. The ban was partially lifted within weeks. Shipments slowly resumed, but prices stayed elevated. Canada slapped a 35% tariff on Russian goods, and other countries followed with their own restrictions. The supply never fully returned to what it had been. The rest of the world's tubes came from JJ Electronic in Slovakia, a company that had been quietly making quality tubes since the early 1990s. And several factories in China. The largest Chinese manufacturer, Shuguang, had actually shut its main plant for facility relocation back in 2019 and only restarted around 2024. In the United States, one domestic producer, making one type of tube. That was about to change, because the crisis that nearly broke the industry also lit a fire under it. And what came next looked a lot like an American comeback. Subscribe if you're not already. We're about to get to the good part. To understand the comeback, start with records. Vinyl records. In 2024, U.S. vinyl revenue hit $1.4 billion. Third straight year outselling CDs in units. This isn't for nostalgia's sake. This is a real growing market with real money in it. For the people who take their listening seriously, the real audiophiles, the sound of vinyl doesn't feel complete through a transistor amplifier, not because they're old-fashioned, because vacuum tubes produce a specific harmonic warmth that every digital amplifier in the world has been chasing for 60 years and still hasn't fully caught. In this world, there's something called tube rolling. It's the practice of swapping different vintage tubes in and out of your amplifier, searching for a particular tone the way a serious wine collector searches for a specific vintage. And the prices reflect it. Original Western Electric 300B tubes from the golden era, hundreds of dollars a piece. Telefunken diamond bottom preamp tubes from Germany, same story. Mullard EL34s from the old Blackburn factory in England. Collectors chase those the way other people chase classic cars. Rare, revered, not getting any more common. And it isn't only the audiophile world. Guitar players are making the same choice. In 2024, tube guitar amplifiers still accounted for 38% of total revenue in that segment. Digital modeling technology keeps getting better. Professionals keep choosing tubes anyway. Not out of sentiment, because they think they sound better. All of which brings us to one company, Western Electric. This is the company that manufactured tubes for AT&T's telephone network for over a century before the industry collapsed in the 60s and the brand went quiet. Today, at their Rossville Works factory in Georgia, they're making vacuum tubes in America again. Their flagship tube, the 300B Triode, the one audiophiles have argued about for decades, retails at $1,499 for a matched pair, and people are buying them. At Axpona 2026, Western Electric announced plans to bring the 12AX7 back to American manufacturing. The 12AX7 is the most widely used preamp tube in guitar amplifiers worldwide. For decades, not one has been made on U.S. soil. That's changing. The global vacuum tube market, as of 2025, $3.3 billion, projected to hit $5.3 billion by 2032. A global industry built on a technology they buried 60 years ago. But here's what makes this story even bigger than the dollar figure. The comeback isn't just about the past. At NASA, a team of engineers has been quietly rebuilding the vacuum tube from scratch. And what they've built could change how we think about electronics entirely. At NASA's Ames Research Center, a team of engineers has been doing something that sounds like a contradiction. They've been reinventing the vacuum tube, not restoring one, not repairing one, building an entirely new version. They call it the nanoscale vacuum channel transistor. It works on the same basic principle as a 1940s tube. Electrons moving through a gap. But that gap is now just 50 nanometers wide. Smaller than most living cells. Fabricated on a chip using standard semiconductor techniques. Why does that matter? Because conventional computer chips fail in radiation. Deep space is full of it. Cosmic rays that scramble data, corrupt memory, and destroy circuits. The closer you get to a planet like Jupiter, the worse it gets. The NVCT doesn't have that problem. Radiation passes right through the vacuum channel without touching it. The device keeps working. It's been tested at radiation levels typical of deep space missions, came through without measurable damage. The target for early deployment, Europa, Jupiter's moon, one of the most radiation-intense environments in our solar system. Think about what that destination means. Europa is where Jupiter's radiation belt is at its worst. The same engineers who buried this technology in the 1960s couldn't keep a room full of it running for more than a day without something burning out. The engineers at NASA looked at the hardest environment we've ever tried to reach and reached for the same fundamental idea. Sometimes the idea was never the problem. It was just the size. In your kitchen, in cancer treatment centers, aboard the farthest machine humanity has ever sent into space, on concert stages, and in dedicated listening rooms, in a factory in Georgia making American tubes again. That's where the vacuum tube is right now. The technology declared finished before most of the people watching this were born. They weren't wrong that the world had moved on. They were just wrong about whether it mattered. Maybe the lesson isn't that the vacuum tube survived. Maybe it's that we should be a lot more careful about what we decide to throw away. What other technology do you think we gave up on too soon? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.